right, this is gonna be a fun one because the account is user throwaway 2021 1250 on the subreddit NuclearRevenge. This is today's RR show. Vince with you, just setting this story up for Andy. The title of the story is "He Scoffed at Me, so I got him fired and sent back to his country."
So let me preface this by saying I do feel somewhat bad about the events that transpired. But it would be eating my conscience to say that I didn't do it on purpose. Because I did. I started my first full-time job when I was 20, fresh out of college and ready to take on the world. I resided in a Middle Eastern country where people got brought in frequently by employers, and one mistake could cost them everything. I was outside this because I was a resident of the place despite not being from there. Anyways, when I first started, I got along very well with my co-worker despite the fact that he came off as a lot of bad things for me. We tried hanging out, but the more I got to know him, the more disgusted I became. He was sexist, a purist of his religion where he believes execution of certain people should be allowed, and he was extremely homophobic. But nonetheless, I tried making friends with him because I was open to anything. In our office, we have a portable Wi-Fi that he took with him every day. Free internet. And I never commented on this because I have my own. I can afford it, and so can he. More on this later. The closer I got to him, the more he opened up, but in the worst ways. He would send me lewd images while we're in the office of women, talk about drug use, and sometimes disappear from work for hours on end while I man the office. Like I said, I was 20. I was still young and naive, and I tried my best to seem calm and friendly. I wanted to make an impression. This man, however, was the opposite. He was several years older than me and acted like he was above me through every step. But I ignored it because I wanted to be civil. Sometimes I would help him with his work until eventually his work became mine. He would just expect me to do it without even lending a hand. I didn't say anything, I just did it. Him missing from the office became more and more frequent. Sometimes he'd only be at work for a measly 2 of the 9 hours. Popping in and out. And the office manager's too chicken shit to say anything to the general manager. Then there's the lateness, where I would come in on time every day and he'd come in an hour late. Still, I kept my mouth shut. I escalated to him adjusting attendance records, so it seems like he's not absent. Even though his absences were frequent, unfortunately, he was put in charge of that too. I remained quiet throughout all of this, remained civil, until finally, I spoke to the general manager about pursuing a different line of work. I was always into graphic design, and they needed to get some work done, so I offered to do it. But during this time, I couldn't afford a lot of things anymore because I had to help pay bills for my parents. So I usually just walked to work back and forth every day and limited my eating to once a day, meaning the Wi-Fi was no longer something I could afford. So as an agreement, I could take the office Wi-Fi with me and work on designs from home. However, my co-worker didn't agree to this, and pretty much attacked me with a barrage of insults. He scoffed at the fact that I needed the Wi-Fi to do work, and he said I was a joke. I've suppressed the majority of what the conversation held, but it went something like this. I just need it tonight. You can have the Wi-Fi tomorrow. Why? It's not yours. I need it to do some design work. Yeah, me too. I needed to do that, so leave it here. I couldn't remember much of what else was said, but there was a scoff after he said that. And he made fun that my design sucked and that I should just stop while I'm ahead. My blood boiled and I reached a point of no return. I immediately phoned the office manager and talked about the situation and how if I don't get the Wi-Fi, I'll complain to the general manager, who did in fact give me his blessings, unlike this turd. He immediately called my co-worker and told him to give me the Wi-Fi, which he did. And that was that. Except, I'm a petty person, and I'm not about to let some asshole get off with a slap on the wrist. The next day I went to the head office and had a meeting with the general manager. I spoke to him about all the misconducts this guy had, how he's always late, never in the office, changes his absences, steals money sometimes, etc. I spilled my heart out on all his wrongdoings, showing the messages on my phone I was sent during shifts that I never asked for, and how I'm doing all of his work. It escalated to a point where he got brought into the main office for a meeting where I proceeded to berate him in front of the manager, and he could only try and defend himself. But I was prepared. It turns out that the office manager never even spoke to the general manager about his misconduct. Afterwards, he was brought back into the office, having been yelled at by both me and the general manager. And I could say that's where it ends. Except it's not. After he left, the general manager realized if I had been doing all the work, then why didn't I say anything? I responded that I was simply there to work and to help. However, with what just happened and the fact that this guy was getting paid more than me, I've decided that if he's here, then I won't be staying at the company. I gave him a choice, me or this guy. The answer was obvious, because by the next day, he was handed a termination letter, and another letter that states he's been booked a ticket and has to head back to his home country within a month. And he's barred from entering the country for several years due to his public misconduct that was reported by a certain someone to the local authorities. I could say that's where it ends. But okay, one more. This is the last one, I swear. You see, he had a girlfriend back home, a fiancée more like, whom he has been cheating on. Funny enough, he added me on Facebook when we first met, and she proceeded to add me too because he talks about me to her. Well, our messages weren't just inappropriate, it showed details of him cheating on her. Without me questioning him if that's a good idea. Every screenshot sent, all the photos of the women he's been with sent. She was livid. And I kept apologizing for keeping her in the dark, but that I thought she deserved to know at least. I haven't spoken to her since, but judging from the fact that her Facebook status no longer states she's engaged to him, is enough of a confirmation. I sent him one last thing before blocking him on every social media we've been connected in. You deserved this, shithead. It's been several months since then, and I'm thriving at work. I got a raise, I have better co-workers, and I'm getting a promotion. As for him, well, he's out there somewhere in the world. Who knows? And who cares, right? We're no longer in the same country, so whatever else happens to him no longer phases me. Though he did once send me a photo of his fake Italian ID because he was planning on illegally migrating there next year. I'm on the fence. Should I send it to the Italian authorities or not? Just as a precaution, mind you. I might consider migrating there at some point. How much of an arrogant twat do you actually have to be to not only cheat on your girlfriend/fiancé, but to then send pictures of it to randos at the office? Come on, man. Our next one is from another very legitimate sounding name, Nuclear Wasteoid. When the gift horse bites you back. My story begins about 6 years ago. I was a frequent and dedicated customer of a locally owned smoke and vape shop in my hometown. The owner heard me say I was looking and offered me a job. It will have to be under the table and I can't pay more than $10 an hour, he said. I was just happy to be out of the house and seeing someone other than the kids in the family. So the owner spent a day training me, gave me her cell number and door keys, then told me to call if I had any questions. That was it. No other info besides, call me if you need pricing. It was kind of a sink or swim thing. They then started another business in another state. My shop was in California, and they opened another business on the other side of the country. I went from Friday and Saturday to full-time. I went 2 months without being paid because they just never came home. I finally told them, look, I'm basically running the place alone. I can do all the ordering and whatnot, send you it for approval, and then you can just stay there and pay me via Zelle. They said yes to all of it, except for the pay part. Instead, they would have their family friend, T, check the books and receipts, then check my hours, then pay me up to that date every 2 weeks. T got paid quite handsomely, but also took whatever she pleased from the shop too. I took note of everything she took, how long she was there, and sent all of it to the owner, Lisa. T did not like that because it was all taken out of her pay. So she started being busy and not showing up to pay me when she was supposed to. Instead of every 2 weeks, it was every month, or every 5 or 6 weeks. And I had to text my boss to beg for an advance of pay to get gas. So from 2 days a week to 7 days a week with 10-hour days, Lisa and her hub refused to pay for expensive software. So I did all the supply lists, ordering and tax stuff on my Google Drive and sent the info they wanted by email. Eventually I began to get phone calls that I had the wrong music playing on the stereo. I played reggae and she wanted hardcore rap. Most of the customers preferred the reggae, but if they preferred it, they can get out now. So I generally ignored it because they were paying customers after all. I began updating and improving the shop at their request, all on my own dime, that they swore to reimburse, which brought in a bunch of customers and new stock. Our CBD section and customer base bloomed, our vape section went from 2 shelves to an entire wall, and people from other cities came to our shop because I could repair almost anything that was broken. Our water tobacco pipes became huge, with hand-blown glass pieces from famous and very well-known artists on sale. From my connections, they got them hella cheap and boosted that price 400% to sell them. Basically, I took a small-town, rinky-dink vape shop and made it hugely successful, very profitable and well-known across the state. All this time, I was told I would be getting a percentage of the profits and that I was family, and they always treat family well, with profit sharing being done at Christmas. Christmas comes and I'm told our other business is doing bad. Can we pay you the percent in 6 months? I agreed. More the idiot. COVID happened, but we kept our heads above water, becoming listed as a necessary business. I pointed out their business license still listed them as selling food and snacks, even though they didn't. So we stayed open. All the other shops cut their hours or closed, but we were pulling in cash like never before. Tea was coming in sporadically, and I was working my ass off, but since I loved the shop and my customers, I tolerated it. But I was massively overworked. I eventually paid for it. I was admitted into hospital for 2 weeks for exhaustion and a heart condition that the exhaustion made worse. The whole time I was in there, my boss kept calling and making me prove I was in the hospital. I had calls constantly from T, who filled in, and just in general, Lisa was pissy as hell. I was in the hospital and not her shop. I get out and back in the shop and she asked me to work on a huge project for her. Scan 5 years worth of register receipts, enter the daily totals for all 5 years into a spreadsheet separated by year. Cash, credit, CBD cash, CBD credit, credit report, total bank deposits, hours worked, discounts given, etc. Took me 3 weeks to do it all. Saved to my Google Drive, then emailed to Lisa. Never thought about it again. Then she calls me, frantic, because the accountant said it looks like we made way too much during COVID. I told Lisa that we had been the only shop open. That was the difference. She demanded I resend the spreadsheet, but only the part for the year 2020. I do. Then, out of nowhere, she fires me, sends in T with T's daughter, my replacement, and tells me to pack up and leave. No final pay, no reimbursement for the profit sharing, nothing. I called Lisa and she tells me something that pisses me off to this day. You're bringing the wrong kind of people. I didn't work that hard to update and open that place for you to fill it with F slurs and N words. That is it, and that she would settle up my last pay later. She didn't. I was pissed. I left. I'm a lesbian. She knew that. When our store was at its worst during COVID, the LGBTQ+ community came together and supported the shop because I was there, and we all helped one another. Our biggest and best paying customers were LGBTQ+, so I let all of them know what was said. I also told a few well-placed people about what Lisa had said during our phone call. I also had numerous texts where she had screen capped the security feed and pointed out people to run off, who strangely had all been people of colour. I also told the leader of the local LGBTQ association and the Chamber of Commerce leaders what had been said and showed my proof. As they were former customers of mine, they were appalled and spread it far and wide, utterly destroying their customer base. A month after firing me, she called, apologizing for the firing and making up excuses for not paying me, then asking where I had saved that spreadsheet. I told her that it was all on my Google Drive. She said if I sent it to the accountant again, she would settle up. Just don't send her 2020. She already has that one. So, after making my life miserable for years, putting me in the hospital and then firing me just to pay T's daughter $5 an hour more, yeah, I am taking my revenge. She gave me the number of her accountant so that I could make sure the info got to her. I called Ms. Accountant and asked her, "Can you send me what you do have? I don't want you to have to go through duplicate documents if you don't have to." See? I knew that Lisa had been tweaking numbers and figures so that her other biz, medical marijuana, could funnel through the store and be seen as legit. See, if you sell medical marijuana, you couldn't really put it into a normal bank because if the feds wanted to, they could seize it because it is still federally illegal and banks are under federal rules. You had to prove that the money didn't come from selling medical marijuana to get it back, which could take years. There are banks who deal solely with people in the marijuana business, but even the cheapest account at the cheapest institution has a $1,000 a month flat fee. This was back in 2020 though, maybe it's different now. My boss was not one to pay money like that just for a bank account, so she was laundering it through the store. Her accountant thought the numbers were suspicious but had no proof. Until now. I was sent all the spreadsheets that Lisa had sent over. And wow! Was she in trouble? She was claiming that our little store was making over $10,000 a day, more than we really were. And it all started happening in, you guessed it, 2020. So I accidentally sent her the real spreadsheet for 2020, oopsie poopsie, with all the scanned receipts and the credit report scans and the bank deposit scans. All the info needed to really blast Lisa into the stratosphere. The accountant called and asked me, "Are these all real? Are you sure these are the right figures?" I said, "Yeah." All she needed to do was click on the day, and it hyperlinked to all of that day's info, register receipts for the day, the square breakdown for the CBD sold that day, and the bank deposit and credit report receipts. I told her that these were the fully updated and accurate info for that year. I remember the accountant sounded stunned. She disliked my boss as much as I did for her lies, late payments, and utter contempt she treated her with. I emailed Lisa and told her all the info was sent and that I was waiting for the payment as promised. Surprise, surprise, she blocked me and no payment went through. As I was paid under the table, it was a she said, she and her husband and her best friend and new worker said. So it was the least I could do to take her and her lying ass down. I also looked up the IRS tip email and sent them copies of the real and altered files along with a copy of their business licenses. They would ask me to text them copies of them and their tobacco license. And then also called the code enforcement to let them know that their fire alarm system didn't work, that they had no emergency exit, and their extinguishers haven't been serviced in 4 years. They just sent a friend to fake it. I turned them into the FDA website for selling to underage customers. The new cashier was selling to underage all the time. And then sent in another anonymous tip that they were selling carts and wax they'd made in their new business on the East Coast and were selling it out of the shop. The fallout was glorious. They were shut down by code enforcement and the fire department for having black mold on the walls due to a leak that they refused to fix, exposed wiring, no up-to-date servicing on the fire alarm system, and the fire extinguisher was inoperable. They were shopped by the FDA, and they had to pay some pricey fines for 3 different underage sales and had their tobacco license pulled. Right now, the IRS is doing a complete audit of the last 10 years of the store's taxes, and they shut the store's doors for good about 2 months ago. The bad part? I never got to hear what happened to that East Coast medical marijuana business. Huh. Oh well. Them's the breaks, I guess.
So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince. Thank you to my producer, Kevin, and we'll see you next time here on the RR Show.